Grief isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome back to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode brings real conversations with people from around the world who have navigated profound loss and found the strength to rebuild their lives with courage and intention. Together, we'll explore what it means to move from survival to integration, to reclaim your identity, honor your grief journey, and create a future grounded in resilience and purpose. Walk with us as we transform grief into growth, one story at a time. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to invite you guys to head over to empowergriefjourney.com, where you guys can explore recent episodes of the podcast, grab a copy of the Empower Grief Journey anthology, and book a free grief clarity call to start your own Empower Grief Journey. Today, I have a wonderful guest with us. Her name is Angela Lenhardt, and she is an intuitive life coach and hands on energy healer. She assists her clients in transforming and healing their mind, body, and spirit from the inside out. Angela is an author of a best selling book, A Charmed Journey, an inspired guide to personal transformation, and Trigger the Wonder Horse, memoir of a spiritual warrior. Her books are available on Amazon. I'm excited today to have Angela on the show because I very rarely get to talk about pets and animals in the grief space and loss. And Trigger, her horse, was a big part of her life. And I'm excited for you guys to hear her story. I'm not going to ruin it. But I'm excited for you guys to tune in today and hear this different side of grief that we often don't get to talk about. So without further ado, Angela, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited for our conversation.
I am too, and I love that you're an equestrian, and I love that you had a horse Trigger for, I think you said 25 to 30 years, right in that ballpark?
25 plus years, about 26.
Yeah, and I have not been around horses much in my life, but the people I know who have had a horse, it's a very personal relationship with them, and I've come to hear that horses have quite the personality.
They do. They teach you more about yourself than you know about yourself. And if you have the ears and the eyes to listen and see, you will discover who you are at the deepest core of your being.
I love that. Well, share with us a little bit about your relationship with Trigger and where that started. He sounded like a beautiful horse.
He was my BFF, my soulmate, and he was just my rock in life. And I don't even know where to begin other than I rescued him. He came into my life 3 days after my another horse that I rescued had suddenly passed away. Trigger came into my life, and we just walked this journey together. And with that, I I truly met who I am, who places inside of me that I needed to heal, but also the places of an empowerment and my strengths, and how I was able to use my strengths to help others. And that was probably the coolest part of our journey together is Trigger taught me where I needed to heal and how to heal and to become more patient in life, and to seek the joy in day-to-day living, but then to use the God-given strength within me to then further that and help others along the way. And that was the greatest blessing of Trigger, was just not only just having him as a horse and a beloved companion, but it was to transform help other people transform their lives too, through through Trigger. Animals hold such a they have the ability to hold space. They have 4 feet on the ground. We only have two. They show up every day unconditionally, and that is, I think, why God gave us animals, is because it can express unconditional love 24/7. And it's within our human behavior and patterns is when we can't always see and express the unconditional love, but animals can do that unconditionally, and they do it. They just do it because that is naturally who they are, just like God. That is naturally who He is, and He can. And through our animals, we can be more of our Christ-like self.
I really love what you said about unconditional love because I've had rabbits for the last 15 years, I think, and I love them dearly, just like you love Trigger. And I've learned, funny story, rabbits and horses have a lot in similarity with personalities, as I've come to find. But that unconditional love part is something that we as humans struggle with in many ways. For some reason, we have this human emotion on our side where we attach conditions to love in a lot of ways, but then when we do lose somebody or even a pet for that matter, even like Trigger, we have a lot of emotion that actually comes out, which is that unconditional love, and it comes out in that moment when we lose somebody. It's a very interesting concept. I found it funny that while we're alive, our love flows between unconditional and conditional, but when we lose someone, it becomes unconditional at that point.
I think the natural human behavior is how can we be more unconditional towards each other, towards humanity, and 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 to ourselves as well. It's when we hold ourselves hostage and where we continuously, look at ourselves in the mirror and talk down to ourselves. What we're doing is really, bashing our inner self, our spirit. And that will only lead to a place of detriment. It doesn't lead to a space of empowerment. And it's when we can show up unconditionally for ourselves in our authentic self, our the divine spark within us, is when life can flourish. And again, that's what animals bring to the table, because they represent that. They will mirror our behavior, our deepest emotions. And animals know right away who you are, like before they, I think science says that animal or horses can feel uh like the human heartbeat up to 5 feet away. So
Wow.
it's crazy. They know who you are before you even get into their personal space. And if you're carrying the emotion of anger and grief, uh unforgiveness, that they'll sense that, and their behaviors will mimic what you are subconsciously expressing.
Well, that's what I've definitely noticed in my own pet journeys I've had. I had lost my rabbit I had for 12 years a year and a half ago, and I went to get a new rabbit, and I was big about letting the animal pick me because that's just how it works in the rabbit world. Some rabbits aren't going to like you, it's just what it is, but the ones that do like you come to you, they gravitate your way. So it's just about waiting for that right one to show itself. And my little guy Finn that I have now, a funny story. The minute I met him, all I did was stick my hand in the cage and I waited for him to come up, and he licked my hand right away. He was Mr. Just like I'm a ham and I need attention. But he's a little diva too. Like I take him downstairs at night and he stomps his foot, which I think is funny because that's what they do when they're mad. But then like 2 seconds later, he's running for a treat and wants love kind of thing. So they're very representative of, our interactions of our emotions and whatnot. It's fascinating.
It is. And based off of my experiences and in life, I see how divinely organized this entire planet, the cosmic system is. And I do believe that God assigns us animals and to help us with this earthly journey, from starting at a very, very, very young age. um People as well as animals come in and out of your life, and they help to cultivate and teach us as we move along on this earthly plane. So
That's really beautiful.
I believe that God, they are ordained.
Well, you mentioned to me in the pre-interview that, there were many times you went to Trigger through when you were going through hard times of things, and just you had this connection. I have a hard time putting it in words, but I get it from what I've experienced with animals that they can just read you and understand you, and they have this way, when we're having a very hard time in life in many ways, and that's why I do this podcast, is that society has all this movement of, well, we always got to be moving forward, doing the next thing, get over it, move on and let go. And the human psyche and emotion doesn't live in that world. Funny story. We adapt to it, but it isn't actually an alignment of who we are. And oftentimes when we have a pet or we have an animal in our life, the funny part is that animal wants to meet you exactly where you're at. They're not looking for anything other than who you are in that moment. And they have this way without words, because obviously they can't talk like we do, but through their facial expressions, their tone, their body, there's just this essence of them, this aura, I like to call it, where they kind of give off the vibes of like, hey, you've had a hard time today. I get it. I understand it. Let me be here for you.
Well, that is the gift of animals, is that they're always in the present moment. And if we could live ourselves, always in the present moment, we are aware of our surroundings at all times. And this is where the wisdom comes in. This is where we hear the God voice. That's where we hear our next instruction on which direction and way to go. Animals teach us, so they innately teach us to be in the present moment, especially horses, because if you are on, well, it's depending on the horse, but whenever I was on the back of a trigger, when I could ride him, if I wasn't paying attention, he would take off in one direction, and he would know if I was paying attention to my phone or I was off in a dream state. He would do something that would bring me my attention back to that present moment and wake up. And that is what this life is about, to be in the present moment, to be present with the person in front of us, to be present with ourselves, because this is the present moment is the only place where you have power. The only place where you can the change the situation is right here and now. You can't do anything about the past, and we can't do anything about the future. But what we can do is change our energy, change our thinking, change our actions in the present moment, because this is the only moment that we have. Nothing is guaranteed for any of us. So being in the present moment is the gift. Like, the present moment is the presence gift. This is
I,
the gift, is to be here and now. And it isn't to be any place else other than looking up, seeing the clouds, admiring the moon, the stars, looking down, seeing the flowers, the plants, the trees, and then finding the space of gratitude, that you can go, oh my God, God is unconditional, because look at all the things that he has given us. And so this is what I think animals bring, is we can be in the present moment, and in the present moment, you can sit, you can look around, and you can be in a space of awe.
I love what you said about being present because I think, in today's society, we have a hard time with that because we're living very much in instant gratification and high speed movement of life. And when we go through grief, by the way, go through loss, those hard moments of life, it's like hitting the brakes at 100 miles an hour in a car in a dead stop. And your whole world stops. You're forced to be in the present, whether you want to or not, whether you're
Mhm.
comfortable with it or not, or whether you like it or not. You're there in the present moment. And I think why it's so uncomfortable is because we don't live there all the time. And it's a very, in many ways, it's a new place for us in those moments. It's like kind of like this, ooh, what is this? And this doesn't feel right, or I'm not used to this. I wanted to ask you, when Trigger passed away, what was it like for you going through that grief process? Because I could just, I lost an animal after 12 years. I can't imagine having one for 25 plus years to go through that because that's such a big, big part of life right there.
My life revolved around him. I made my office schedule around him, my exercise schedule around him. When I would travel, everything was around Trigger. And it was because he brought me so much joy. I wanted to be with him. So I mean, how he died was crazy, because there were so many signs that I was given by God to let me know that God was going to take him home. So I knew that each day was a precious gift. And there, obviously, there is the story behind it, of our journey together. But I knew that our time was limited up, uh, maybe, let me just say, like, the day that he passed away, it was the most glorious day ever. It couldn't have been more beautiful, with from the environment outside to the people that were there to how it was all aligned. Was such a beautiful day. But when I got to the barn, Trigger had already he had fallen during the night, and so in that space, you don't have to, when you euthanize a horse, you have to give them, I think, a couple shots. The first one takes their feet out from underneath of them so they drop, and then the second one is that you overload the body with potassium, so that stops their heartbeat.
Mm.
And I always prayed to God. I said, God, please, 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 never, never let me have to take Trigger's feet out from underneath of him. I prayed for that. I was like, God, just take him during the night, like somehow just make him already be on the ground when I get there, because that would have broken my heart. So Trigger went down in the middle of the night. When I got to the barn that morning, everybody was there, and it was the most heart wrenching thing I ever had to do, was give Trigger that final shot. And because he had been with me 26 years through through the death of my mom, through divorces, through loss of everything, my life, and restarting all over again. And now he was going to be gone forever. So I had to learn how to navigate this life just with me. And that was extremely hard. It was like, okay, I have to do this, but I had to show up for Trigger. And that day after he was gone, I drove away from the barn. And as I'm driving away from the barn and I get close to my house, I'm at a stoplight, and the car in front of me, their license plate says Faith. And I'm like, oh my God, it just about it just tore me up. And God was showing me all these signs along the way, that it's going to be that's going to be okay, that I'm with you, you're going to be able to do this. And I had to rearrange my life on how to do life. I didn't know how to do life without Trigger. I didn't know how where to begin. But first I let myself grieve for a while, which I it is an important part of life. Is grief. You have to grieve, you have to sit with the pain, you have to allow all those emotions express themselves, but then you have to pull yourself up, and you have to decide on how you're going to move forward. And you have to choose. Every minute of the day is choosing the next best choice, because the sadness and the grief and the distraught is overwhelming, and it's paralyzing, and it will drag you down. It will tell you to sit in your house and shut the windows, and reminisce, and pick up a bag of chips, or drink that extra soda, or go for that bottle of wine. And you have to choose on who you want to be. And so that is what Trigger taught me with our time together: is who do I want to be? Who do I want to be in this present moment? I had to decide who I wanted to be from there on forward. And so I just, like, because he had trained me from discipline, showing up, unconditional love, I had to choose to do that for myself. So I rearranged my life. I got a part-time job, with what I used to how I used to spend the time at the barn. I decided to learn a new skill, and challenge myself, put myself in a different environment, and learn something new. I chose to exercise. I would get up at 5 in the morning and go work out. I would go to the gym at 7 o'clock at night and go work out. So I occupied my time with things that would feed me. And it was tough. It was tough because I love, generally, I love community. I love going out. I love sitting at coffee shops. I even like going to restaurants and sitting at the bar, and eating a burger, and all of that. I like to, that's who I am. I like people. But there were times that I didn't want to be around people, and then there were also times that I knew that I had to be around people, because their energy, their compassion, they could is what I needed to fill that void in my heart. So at the end of the day, it was putting myself in a healthy environment that would get me to that next place of me, of me. Here I am.
Well, I'm glad you shared that because that's something that I try to explain on this show is how we walk from grief into healing. And it's very, very different for every single person. There's no one single way to do it, by the way.
No,
But what I try to say is that it's always that one step forward. You were talking about that next best choice. And I tend to lean there myself in ways. And I call it the 1% rule that I learned from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, that everybody's so focused on big steps and moving forward and all that. And some days we just can't do that. It's just not possible. And so, what I thought about was when we focus on those small steps, those real small ones every day. And I know it looks very slow, like you're not doing anything, but over time, over a matter of months, it can be very big. Over a year, it can be huge. And when we choose to make those small steps every day, those small choices, they build into something bigger. And that's where we allow ourselves to move from that place of grief into a place of healing.
correct. There isn't a recipe, and there isn't a recipe for grief. Everybody's got their own process, right? Everybody's got a process, and everybody's got a story attached to it. And grief is scary. It can be paralyzing. It can be overwhelming. It is, it brings you to your knees. It's that you sit and sob and sob and sob, and then you have to choose to get up. You have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and carry on. And it is the toughest thing you'll ever do. But at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own life and how we want to show up for our own life. So God gave us this life, and it does not guarantee that every single day's bliss. I don't see anywhere in scripture that God said, you know what, life is going to be glorious if you follow me. No, follow God. Follow God. And you, as you move through grief, as you move through transition and different stages in life and experiencing different emotions from loss to gain and then going back again, because life is just like a roller coaster anyway. You walk with God and God gets you through it, but that doesn't mean that you are going to be exempt from feeling and living life. You just have God's help, and
Yeah.
God sends his messengers through our, I think, our fur babies to help us navigate through this life.
Yeah, I think that, that's the big, powerful walk of faith. And I'll be honest, grief is the one that will really push it if you are faith-based in any way. It will push you to the limits on that of what you believe, what you feel, where everything is in accord. There's times that, I went through that a lot after I lost my son. I remember shouting at a cross that fell in the trees at my house, and I was mad at God. I said, how can you allow something that horrible to happen? How? And I couldn't make sense of it. And it doesn't make sense, and I think that's what I try to share with people in grief is it doesn't make sense. It's never going to make sense. You're never going to understand the why or the what or behind it. You're never going to know. And that's a hard, hard thing to live with, by the way, because our human mind wants to go to this place of, okay, well, I can rationalize something or I can make sense of it or I can understand it. And when we go through those moments of loss, and I don't care if that's a pet or a person or a job or a relationship, sometimes it just doesn't make sense and we're left hanging there in the unknown, and that's what's really painful as we navigate through grief. And that's why healing, doesn't have a recipe. As you said, there is no one way to heal. I can't tell you the way to do it because my way doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
But it's through the storytelling of us sharing our grief story and our healing journey. And this is where I don't like that society tells us, oh, don't talk about grief, it's negative, it's painful, it's hard. They're trying to push all that out of the way and say, well, there's only this positive thing over here. But I truly believe in many ways because I've been reading a lot of books about grief, and there's this big ideology I've seen come through the grief books where grief is a transformational process for us. And it's uncomfortable, it is messy, it is painful, it's hurtful, it doesn't make sense. But what it's really doing is tearing apart those things in our life that just are no longer meant to carry forward with us. And that puts us into a place of having to learn how do we detach from our past in certain ways. There's obviously things we're going to carry forward and remember and honor, just like Trigger being in your life and bunnies I've had in my life. I'm always going to carry that forward. I'm never going to forget. But there are parts of that life, maybe where I was, where it was a job or this or that, that I can't take forward. And so I have to say, hey, that was this chapter of life, and it was fun, or it taught me this lesson, or it was a blessing. But now I got to go forward and do something new. And that's where grief gives us that opportunity.
It does, and I think that that we can use everything in our life as we use it as wisdom. We use it as wisdom to move forward because God uses everything, and you have to choose to look at that experience as wisdom because it will show up again. There's no way around it. It's like it's a cycle, and history repeats itself. And so everything that you've ever gone through in life will show up again, and the the cool thing about it is to be able to look in those uncomfortable places, that uncomfortable part of your story, those grief lessons, the sadness, the sorrow, and to go, how can I turn this into something? How can I turn this into an opportunity to share and to express my heart and again to be more Christ-like and to show up for others and to express that unconditional love. So you have to choose to use every piece of your sadness and turn it into gold. You turn it into gold for something else, and you will find that if you're willing to do that, and some people say I've been doing this work, this life coaching stuff for 26 years. I've gone through a lot of grief. It wasn't just through trigger. I've had grief of my mom, from the living, from the I left my house at 14 because my mom could no longer take care of me and my brother. So I understand the abandonment, and there's also grief that goes along with abandonment. To then my mom passed away when I was 24. I've had divorces. I've lost my identity. I had to rebuild myself. I've lost all my animals, and then I lost Trigger. So I come from experience of loss on many different levels, from life as a teenager to a grown adult. And I you have to go, okay, so this experience is part of my human journey, and how can I transform this into something good? So when I was like I said, when I was 14, my mom was an alcoholic. So one day I looked at her and I said, get your act together, because Jason and I can't stay here. And I packed up my brother, and I packed up the guns and the knives, and I got in the car and I drove away. And I drove away, and I just trusted that God would drive me to a house, and he did. So my journey of faith started a long time ago. It wasn't, I was a farm. I'm a farm girl. I spent my time out in nature at the barn. This is where I learned how to pay attention to the cosmic energy and to the weather patterns, and pay attention to animals. This is where I grew my connection with God, was out in nature. So it's just it's who I am. And so back then I had to learn how to navigate abandonment and to start my life over as a 14-year-old, and how am I going to go to school, and how am I going to go to college. So grief comes in many different phases in our life, and again we have to go back to each and every experience and go, what was the lesson in that, and how could I transform that into something good, into what gives me strength and confidence to live this life that we signed up for, and how to make the best of it.
What you're alluding to really strongly, and I love this, is I always coach people in grief that things happen either in a season, a reason, or a blessing. They always happen in that format for whatever reason. And that allows us to jump into a new perspective very differently about what we're experiencing. And what I can say confidently is I love your season with Trigger, because you had all these other things happening in life that were hard to navigate, big challenges, by the way. That horse was the stable thing that walked beside you in that season of life when everything else was falling apart. He was the stable one right there with you, and he was walking beside you with that reason. And sometimes those other things that happen, like your mom dealing with alcohol or divorces, for example. I've talked to many people who've gone down that path, and those were all a reason. All of them were that the relationship falling apart. It was a blessing. You can't always say those things, by the way, in the moment, but years later, you can say, wow, you know what? That ran its course, or I learned these lessons from this, or we weren't aligning on the same path, and you know what, it was actually a good thing that that happened, and I became the person I am today because of what I went through with that. And that's not to write off experiences, by the way. That's not to say you can't feel a certain way about it, because I can tell you in any grief story you will feel hurt and pain, but you'll feel blessings and happiness too. And it's a weird space of flow, as I like to call it, where you oscillate between the good and the bad all the time. And giving yourself that, giving yourself that ability to sit in both of those moments. Don't try to avoid one or the other, or blame yourself, shift yourself in many ways. Allow yourself to be present in those moments because, like you said, every time there's something trying to be shown, there's a lesson to learn, something to reflect upon, something that might shift you the right way in life, by the way, that's going to put you in alignment of who you need to become.
And it yes, you learn the lesson, but you also see the beauty and the grace in it. So when I was driving away from the barn the day that Trigger passed away, and I saw the license plate in front of me, the license plate that said faith. I could still be with God. I chose not to turn away from him in that moment. So it is in those dark moments. And believe me, I would not have become the person that I am today if I was always, rainbows and unicorns, because that isn't real. um I've been extremely mad at God before, extremely mad, and raised my fist more than once. And it was, if there's some wisdom that I can share, is you're darn right, I fear God, and he's also a good God. And that, but that doesn't give us, that that doesn't eliminate emotions and what this journey is about. But it's always going back to where we come from and who we are at the end of the day, and to show up being the best versions of ourselves, for ourselves and for others. I mean, you can't give if you don't have a full, if your cup's empty, you don't have much to give, authentically give, right? So this is why the grief process is, and the healing process is so important, because they have to come together, and there has to be light in that as well. So then you can rise to the occasion. You can show up and be, you know, yes, that was tough, and there are still moments that I think about Trigger, or an experience, or even my mom, or a past life, or a past life, and when I was 30 or 20 or whatever it was, and I'll be overwhelmed with grief, and again, I will allow myself to maybe shed a tear. I'll maybe, like, shake my head, like, why, what was I thinking, or whatever. But I can go, I know why I went through that. I know why I was given that experience, and I can see the blessing of it in it, and then I can move forward. It's always about moving forward in the present moment in grace. And there isn't anything simple about it. There isn't a special formula, and it's just to be connected with your breath, to go outside and stand in nature, allow the healing light, the sunlight, the plants, the trees to nurture you. Mother Nature's unconditionally. She gives you unconditional love. Be in the presence. Just sit there, sit your butt down on the ground, connect yourself, and just allow nature to heal and do what she does.
I love that you said that. Okay, I was sitting here thinking as you were talking about all the times I drove through Montana, for example. Montana is one of my favorite states I drive through. But I remember being in the middle of Montana with nothing around other than a little two-lane freeway going like this direction and nothing for miles, either way you look. And there's something grounding about that. I don't know why, but when we pulled over on the side of the road one time, just there's something peaceful out there when there's nothing around, nobody around, and you're just like grounded in a sense with nature and all the distractions of everyday life with smartphones and news and media and all that stuff we distract ourselves with. isn't there, somehow your brain quiets down all of a sudden, and you feel like you step back in your own person for once, and you kind of go, ah, this actually does feel kind of good. Like,
Oh, it is
I
good
don't,
to be human.
yeah, it's like, oh, I can be human today. I don't have to worry about these 10 million things going on.
Well,
Um,
and that's if we can train ourselves to do that at least once a day, we'll find that there are so many blessings that are in front of us all at all times, and then you can look around and see the wonders of the world, and then go, wow, this is a pretty cool experience. So it again, it's I don't think there's one person on this planet that gets to escape loss at some time in life, whether it's loss of it's just loss. You're going to experience loss. People, animals, ourselves, we all transform and we all eventually leave. And it's to make the most of it while you're here. And there is beauty and there is grace when God brings us an animal. He's like, okay, this creature gets to walk with you, and you get to learn how to take care of it, and you get to learn how to discipline yourself and respect yourself, and you have boundaries, and you get to learn how to be a sovereign human being in who we are and how we're going to show up. And that is the sacred presence gift that animals bring to us.
Well, I'm for everybody who's had an animal out there, you guys know what we're talking about today. And there's something special about those bonds. And I remember after losing my pet in particular, my wife was like, maybe we don't get a rabbit for a while. And I said, I don't think I can do that. I said my brain is just wired to take care of something. And I feel like animals give us a purpose too, because we can think about something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's the big true meaning of life I've come to find through my own grief journey is that, grief, it can create you or it can destroy you. It really can. I really mean that from the
Mhm.
depths of my journey I've been through. And I've learned that when we can see our grief journey as something bigger than ourselves and we allow ourselves to transform through it, we're going to find people in the world, by the way, who are standing where we once stood. And we're going to be able to look at those people and say, I know what journey you're about to walk. I know how ugly it is. I know how painful it is. And I had to do it alone, but you don't have to because guess what? I'm going to walk beside you.
Mhm.
And, I've been going to church for the last 2 months. Haven't gone in many, many years. And, I don't know enough to speak fully to it, but I'll just say that as I've been going to church, I've been seeing a lot more of this coming together of people. And I've met people from an array of backgrounds, different personalities, different beliefs, different cultures, values. Some people have their own take on Christianity versus others. And I don't see division between these people. What I do see is that we're a collective group of people who've had different experiences of life, and we just want to help each other. That's the funny part about what I see is that we just want to help each other. And it doesn't matter how hard and rigid we are to our beliefs, but it's that we're open-minded enough to say, I can walk beside somebody and learn from them. And I think that's what grief fully is. And I love that you've shared that today. And I think in many ways, Trigger taught you a lot of things. I'm sure we could talk for hours about that, honestly, because I think he was such a big, big gift and a big, big blessing in your life. And I'm just grateful he was there for you through some of the hardest moments of life because it does make it that much easier when we can have that unconditional being walking beside ourselves through the hardest moments of life.
Absolutely. And that's the message too that I want to share with others is that we all have I mean a person or maybe an animal or even a neighbor's dog that we can go to or look at or pet, and we could just be in that space and allow their energy, that healing energy that's with them, maybe transform some of the grief and sadness in our own life, and you'll get through it. Everyone gets through it, but you have to deliberately put yourself in an environment that nurtures you and feeds your soul.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. And as we wrap up the podcast, I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about your books really quickly. You mentioned that you wrote a book called The Charm Journey, an inspired guide to personal transformation, and Trigger the Wonder Horse, a memoir of a spiritual warrior. Tell me a little bit about that writing process with books, because I found everybody ends up writing a book in some way, shape, or form, but it's always some different situation that leads us into that path.
The Charm Journey I wrote probably 10, 12 years ago now. It was when I had that wake up call where God got real serious with me and said, you need to change your ways. And I lost everything and I pretty much lived a homeless life, and I wrote that book. So I wrote that book sitting underneath trees and in the coffee shops, and I had to learn the lessons of forgiveness and boundaries, and it was I tell you what, it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And I made an agreement with God one day. I said, I promise I will learn the lessons and I will write a book. And now you and just let me know that what I did was the right thing, please. And then what I got Wayne Dyer to endorse it, and that was all a God thing. So that's how that journey started, and it was about how I had to heal, my childhood and a lot of lessons, and why I was attracting the relationships that I was. And then again, I had my animals through that, and then Trigger's book and our life together. And my goal is to get that to. I wanted to become a big screen movie. I wanted to teach kids and inspire kids on the power of prayer and common sense, and how to grow up and be your fully expression of God's divine creation that you are.
I love that you said that because something I try to lead people with in the grief space is that there's 8 billion of us walking the planet right now. And that's 8 billion sets of eyes, ears, and a mouth walking. And I try to remind people about is we will never ever fully, truly understand someone else's walk of life because we're not walking it inside them. We never ever will. And so the biggest gift that we can give ourselves, by the way, that will help other people is bringing back to our authenticity of ourselves and walking our journey as best we can on our own, but also seeing those other people that we interact with and engage with as people we can learn from. And I always say that, people always come into our life for a reason, a season, or a blessing. And some people are there for us for decades, sometimes years, sometimes months, and sometimes people leave. It's a reason. Sometimes they leave for a
Sometimes they
blessing.
come in for minutes, you
And they
know.
come in for minutes. This has felt like a powerful hour. But I say that to say that nothing is all bad, nothing is all good. There's always in between with that. And the things that are bad, by the way, that happen, they're powerful lessons that are painful, and I've been through God knows how many of them in my life, as you've described too. But they made us who we are as people. And I think that in many ways, I don't think God makes mistakes. That's a hard one for me to swallow after what I've been through, but I don't think they're mistakes. I think they're things that we're meant to be put under the pressure and put under the fire in many ways to step more towards who we're supposed to become.
Mhm.
And give yourself that opportunity. Sit in the fire sometimes. It's uncomfortable, but sit there with it. Sit with that grief. Sit with that pain. There's nothing wrong with you. You're actually being where you need to be right now.
Absolutely. The hard times and the challenges. And again, this is hard to swallow because I've been there too. You have to sit in the fire, and you have to sit in the fire and let it transform you, because after all, diamonds are made with pressure. So,
Yeah.
every time you get a little pressure added to you and a little more, obstacles and challenges that arise, go, you know what, God, you're just helping me become the diamond that I should be.
Exactly. Well, Angela, this has been a true pleasure to get to record with you today. And thank you so much, by the way, for sharing your story, not only about Trigger, who was in your life for so many decades, I mean, 2.5 decades. That's incredible. But also is telling us too that your other side of life, going through, family trauma with your mom, going through divorces, you've really shown us today that walking through grief is a powerful transformation experience. And it's not something to look at that is awful and terrible and bad, but something that gives us an opportunity to grow, something that gives us an opportunity to step into our alignment and our authenticity, and to recognize that we have beautiful gifts to give out there in the world when we go through these hard moments of life. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you so much for the invite.
And if listeners want to connect with you after listening today, where can they find you?
My website, angelalenhardt.com. Trigger's got his own website, triggerthewonderhorse.com. And I'm on I'm on social media, and my books are on Amazon. So pretty much everywhere.
Awesome. Well, I will have your website link at the bottom so when listeners get done listening to the podcast, they can definitely reach out and connect with you through there. But I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you. I think big things are on the horizon for you.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners today for joining Angela and I on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to share it with somebody you know who may need to hear this today. And if you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to move forward in your grief, I want you to know you don't have to do it alone. I offer free grief clarity calls where we can talk through what you're experiencing, help you understand what's going on beneath the surface, and find a clear path forward. You guys can book those free calls at empowergriefjourney.com. I also want to let you guys know when you visit the website, you can explore past episodes of the podcast and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Podbean so you never miss a conversation. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.